Hello and welcome to the show. It's me, Zack Seward. We're here on the hash today. It's Thursday, July 1st. Happy July, everybody. This is where we talk about the latest and greatest in crypto news and why it matters. We're going to turn to Naomi to lead us off today. Naomi, take us to China.
All right, we're going to China. So today is July 1st, and a lot of people are saying that this date, this calendar date, may have a lot of reason. God, my words are all minced today. Let's start that again, guys. Today is July 1st, and a lot of people are saying that this calendar date in China may be an explanation for the recent crackdown. Now, we've seen in China a lot of things going on. The crackdowns include shutting down crypto mining, instructing banks to stay away from crypto. They're really going down heavy on this. Now, what is July 1st? It is the 100th anniversary of the Chinese Communist Party. So we have, Bobby Lee, he's the former CEO of the early Bitcoin exchange, BTCC. He's now the CEO of the wallet Ballet. And he says, this is a pride thing. This is about kind of cleaning up the crypto space and cleaning out the mess of fraud and all of that that's going on in crypto before this celebration. So I'm going to throw this to the group on your thoughts on all of this. It's very interesting kind of diving into this culture. Zach, I'm going to throw it to you to start off with. What are your thoughts?
I like that we're kind of getting the behind-the-scenes glimpse at some of the motivations that may not be evident at first to the lay reader. So I appreciate the reporting on this piece just to get a feel for some of the animating desires between, but sort of behind what we're seeing in a big way in the market. Outside of that, I mean, I think it's always really fascinating to see how crypto intersects with geopolitical contexts. This was a big reporting focus of our former colleague Lee Quinn, who did a lot of work around the world looking at these things. So this is super interesting to me, right? These are technical systems that sort of exist in the ether out in the internet, but they're very much rooted in geopolitical context. And this to me is very much a story about that. I'll throw this to Will for his take. Will, what's your read here?
Yeah, I think it's spot on to a degree. So we've seen like the Bitcoin mining area has been like one huge area that's been like kind of cracked down recently by the Chinese government. Of course, like we've been talking about that on the show quite frequently. And there's a lot of miners who are staying put in the region. They're not moving mining machines out of the region until after this holiday passes. And then they're going to test the waters again and see if they can boot up operations once more. I think it's a minority of miners, but it is significant that they're looking at this date and saying like, hey, if we like wait around a few weeks and then the holiday passes and the Chinese government's kind of less on top of things, then we can boot up operations again. We'll be fine. I don't know if exchanges like Huobi or OKX are doing similar things. I know that I think Huobi, we talked about last week, was opening up a US branch of operations, and they've moved almost entirely out of China. So I'm assuming that just as like the front consuming facing side of crypto, those exchanges probably are just going to leave town forever. But there is some significance around this date, and a lot of Bitcoin players in the space are kind of waiting after this date to see if they can jump back in.
Yeah, I'll add to that that it's sorry, go ahead, Jen.
I was just going to say it was really interesting to get the cultural perspective here and almost understand the celebration almost around the events that have led up to this date. The story, and maybe you were going to point this out, Naomi, the story mentioned that this has happened leading up to other big national holidays in China. And I wonder, I don't know if you've had a chance to look into it, but do we know what's happened after big events like this happen in China? Do things kind of go back to normal after the celebration has kind of faded away?
I think in the past they have, but some people are saying that this time it's different. Like it feels different. They're really cracking down a lot more heavily than they have in the past. Before they had these proclamations, but as far as I could see, there wasn't much follow through. But now we're seeing, I mean, the hash rate has plummeted. So I really do think that they're following through this time. Another thing that's interesting that Bobby Lee mentioned, he said that, countries like the US, generally speaking, individual investors wouldn't necessarily fault the government for their losses. But this isn't the case in China, according to Lee. He says that when people in China lose money, they blame the government. The government serves as the role of a protector in society. Government's role is to make sure everything is orderly and safe. anything that goes wrong is the government's role to fix it. So, if that's true in the culture of China, then it makes sense that leading up to a national holiday, they wouldn't want civil unrest. They wouldn't want people faulting the government, going to the streets, protesting, saying, why didn't you protect us? Just a very interesting glimpse into this world. But I think another part of this, is probably heavily cultural, but it also has a lot to do with Chinese reserves. So Chinese government worried about people moving money outside of China. So Bobby says that, China can print lots of money without creating major inflation because it has foreign reserves of over $3 trillion. Now, if people are moving money outside of China, that actually has an impact on the reserves. So, I can imagine that it's a pride saving face thing, but also seems to have this monetary implication as well. And, losing control of the money supply, all of that, I'm sure, is a major factor in all of this. David, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing I would say is just to provide a slight counterpoint to kind of the terminology here. Obviously, you have a big celebration. It's about pride. There are some cultural elements, but I think it's important, especially when we talk about China, to separate the Chinese Communist Party from China as a nation and a people. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to the CCP as a 100-year anniversary, this is a celebration of authority, among other things. Right. And this idea that you're going to have people conducting financial activities without state sanction goes against the image that the party wants to project at this moment. I would also say on the topic of fraud, there are, I don't think we have any clear, or at least I haven't seen any clear measures of sort of on a per capita basis, are Chinese people more likely to be subject to, for example, crypto or investing scams. But impressionistically, that does seem to be the case. China was the main target of an operation called Plus Token that I think ended up taking about $4 billion, which is pretty big, even in crypto scam terms. And the point that I would make is that, you make a choice as a society. China has media censorship, right? Social media censorship, a lot more limitations on what you can say. That limits discussion about the nuances of investment, among other things. And so when you create that environment where there is less public communication, I think it does create conditions where people can be more easily deceived by things like Plus Token. And then that forces the government to take a more heavy hand. So I think it's important to look at that big picture of, you clamp down on free speech. You then, as the government, have to come in and take a more forceful hand to control what individuals are doing. So that's kind of the big geopolitical, or the national political picture here, I think.
For sure. That's such a great point. And also, there's been such a rapid growth in users in China over the past 6 months. And so Bobby also mentioned, more and more Chinese people are getting involved in crypto trading, and this becomes a threat to the government. So I think you're spot on with the idea that the CCP is trying to, save face. It's kind of about them maintaining their image. They don't want to be threatened. And so it makes sense. But back to your point, Jen, about what comes next, whether we are, going to relax. I don't know, Zach, if you have thoughts on that question, I'd love to hear them.
Want to relax? Are we talking about relaxing right now? Is that what's going on?
We're talking about relaxing. Is mining gone forever from China? Are they going to roll this back? What's going to go?
I don't know. We're gonna get Will over there, and he's gonna kick ass on the China mining scene. Everybody, check out Compass Mining, North American Mining Reports. So good. Next edition.
I have one last question on.
No. I'm cutting you off, friend. I'm cutting you off. Control room. Right. We got to move on. They say
all right.
We go. All right. We're leaving China. We're talking about some new stuff. We're talking about Syndicate, which had this interesting funding round. 800,000, you say? That's chump change. That's nothing. From 100 folks? Okay, that's kind of crazy. This is a literal list of the cool kids in crypto who just dumped a little bit of money each into this platform that I think could make DAOs the big hot new thing. DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, basically a shared checking account on the internet where you can decide what to back and to what tune. So this may be a platform for a lot of these emerging. They have a few of them already. There was a couple that are DAOs set up to fund underrepresented founders in the crypto space, just to give you sort of flavor for what DAOs can be as a group coordinating vehicle. I think this is quite interesting, and I think DAOs could actually be the hot new thing at some point in the near future. I'm going to throw this to Will. Beyond just the list of people who chipped in a little bit of money on this one, what are you thinking? Are DAOs real? Are DAOs going to click? Are they the next NFT? Tell me about it. and tell me why or why not.
This question is so unfair. It's such a broad one.
I'm hitting you, man. Let's go.
DAOs are certainly interesting, and they're foundational to Ethereum, foundational to kind of like this larger cryptocurrency scene that's outside of Bitcoin. So I think to a degree they need to keep experimenting with it because it's just fundamental to like the value proposition of these alternative cryptocurrencies. So it makes sense that they keep seeing like iterations on top of it. But to be fair, like we've said, it's like the year of the DAO like multiple times. Like I've heard that so often, and of course, like that goes back to the DAO, which didn't end too well. And like there's a lot of DAOs out there, especially investment DAOs. This is not the first, and it won't be the last. It's interesting because they got a lot of top tier investors in here. It's a who's who of crypto Twitter. But in terms of like, is this the future of like how finance works? I think we're just gonna have to keep waiting like another few years. Like DeFi, obviously, the promise of that is pretty easy to grab. If you take a loan off of Compound, that feels pretty snappy and quick and like understandable. For DAOs, I don't quite get it. There's some exclusivity to it that I don't necessarily always love. And I don't always see how it's necessarily better than me just parking investments myself or with a VC firm. But to you, Naomi?
Well, I think the reason why it's valuable is it all comes back to control and what, investments are censorable and whatnot. Like, especially if we're dealing with the DeFi space, DAOs are absolutely necessary in the DeFi space because how do you have governance of a platform, without centralizing it? And is it really DeFi if it's centralized? And so having a DAO and decentralizing that governance structure is super important. Also, just as a fundraising method, I've tried platforms like Flipstarter before. It's super cool. Like, it's really nice to be able to fundraise, to crowdfund things from a wide variety of people, make it public, and not have to go through an intermediary that's going to take like 10% of your money by going through like Kickstarter or, one of these platforms. So I definitely see there's tremendous value just from the profit margins of this, but also because platforms like Kickstarter don't let everyone on them. They have a bad reputation. Like Patreon has a terrible reputation for just deplatforming people. So if you're looking for funding models, I think decentralization absolutely is the future of that. And so DAOs are going to become, I think, increasingly important. But David, I'd love your thoughts on all this.
I think my main thought is that the timing on this is really good. I've been writing about how DAOs are the future since like 2014. But we've gone through the process where people have figured out DeFi, I think, or at least, core people who are engaged. But I'm not aware. I mean, I guess consensus comes sort of close, but they're kind of like researching broad topics and technology around decentralized organizations. But to have an actual company, and I'm not really familiar enough to know what they propose to do. My guess would be that it would be some kind of like services thing for people who want to stand up their own DAOs would be what I would do. But to have a company focused on that idea, it seems like the right time. You're going to have a lot more people experimenting with it in the next, 2 to 3 years, because DeFi has formed a solid foundation that they can build on.
Yeah, I mean, that's my understanding
Zack,
of it. It's sort of that platform play, right? That makes it easy to spin up a DAO, like the hash DAO. We could do the hash DAO, and we could fund hot takes and outfits, decorations, outfits for Steve the cat, other things like that. Yeah, we could sort of like exercise some decision making on what to invest in as a DAO. And I think for there to be an easier platform way to spin this
Name
up
him and he will appear.
Might be interesting going forward. So
Zack,
Jen, what do you got? Yes.
Well, I just actually want to zoom out, and you are so good at explaining how this works. Let's use the hash example. Please explain to us how a DAO would work in the hash universe.
All right, so we could be like, all right, we're making a DAO, and like we have, we all put in $100, and we have $500 in our DAO, and we can exercise, through various mechanisms, how we would want to spend that $500. And I think whether it's the local parent group trying to do fix up the neighborhood playground, or if it's a collective of people who are really bullish on NFTs, these are sort of, this is tooling that I think could be potentially important. But you're right. We've been hearing this story for a while now. And the question is whether now it's going to be different in terms of the ability for people to hop into this thing and to try new experiments. Naomi, I'm really curious for your take, and I saw your hand was up.
Yeah, I'll just go back to the DeFi example because DAOs have been just so important. Like, I mean, we talk about, in the future, this will become a big thing. Like, it's a huge thing right now. Any of the platforms that they have, when they have control over the platform, people push back against that. People don't like that. It's not decentralized if you have these core teams that can implement changes without the community having involvement. And so a lot of them have transitioned over to having a DAO and having governance tokens and all of that. I think it's interesting, like, looking at how this would work. I mean, Dash has a very interesting model. I think it was last year they reinstated their investment DAO, which enables it enables Dash holders to like be earning money, not just because when we know how Dash has this treasury, you can put in proposals, you can get funding and all this. But what if that treasury wasn't just funded by new coins? What if it was funded by money that you're earning from investing in different projects? Like, what if suddenly the incentives changed from what you're choosing to fund, and it suddenly became like something that could actually bring us value back, not just kind of throwing money out and hoping that it helps. What are some actual tangible returns that we could see? So it's very interesting to see what they're doing there and how their DAO functions and in funding these projects, and the money comes in. It's all decentralized. Like, it's super interesting to see these experiments across the space.
Before we go to break, I just want to let everyone know that we did our 100th episode yesterday.
Oh, that's
did you guys know that?
What?
Congratulations.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Woo. Wow. That's a good one.
Hash.
All right. Hash that. All right. That's great. That's great stuff. That's great times. Thanks, Jen. I appreciate that. We will take that break now. And when we return, we are going to gaze lovingly into the orb, and we are going to hope that it blesses us with WorldCoin. We'll talk about that next. Stick with us.
CoinDesk Indexes, the market standard for crypto assets since 2014. Our trusted data powers billions in publicly traded funds. CoinDesk Indexes are the standard used by institutions, and they're the key for investors looking to understand and access crypto markets.
As the company that launched the world's first ever Bitcoin ETF, we at Purpose chose the CoinDesk Bitcoin Price Index, the XBX, to price our assets.
CoinDesk Indexes enabled the early adopters to build crypto investment vehicles, and they're already trusted by a new generation of global investors.
Welcome back to the Hash. Galen's looking good in that commercial. Kind of caught me off guard a little bit here. Yeah, it looks super good. So we're going to turn over to Brazil, where SoftBank has has invested $200 million in a Series B seed round for Mercado Bitcoin, which is one of the largest Bitcoin exchanges in Latin America and the largest in Brazil. So it's interesting to see SoftBank, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is mostly a Japanese investment vehicle. They're famous for investing a lot of money into WeWork and then watching a lot of that money go down the drain. But it's interesting that they're moving into Latin American markets here, especially into crypto. I think the valuation for Mercado Bitcoin now is over $2 billion, which is one of the largest in the area. And that, of course, just kind of pulls on a lot of threads with El Salvador and Paraguay and other countries down south looking to incorporate Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies into their national landscape. David, what do you think about this kind of investments that we're seeing in Latin America and Bitcoin?
So I think the thing that catches my eye here most is that it's SoftBank. And just to be clear, SoftBank has actually done okay for itself with its vision fund and investment funds. On balance, they've actually come out ahead. But you're right; they're famous for making big bad bets on a few things. They had a construction startup that just declared bankruptcy after they put something like $3 billion into them a couple weeks ago. And with this one in particular, I do, we were just talking about timing for DAOs. I wonder about timing on this. And this is perhaps long-term, but I'm increasingly seeing signs that centralized exchanges are going to be much smaller businesses than people might have thought 2 or 3 years ago. It's obviously there's some technological and UI issues, but DEX volume, decentralized exchange volumes are going up pretty steadily. and we're seeing more interest and openness to that. I don't want to be too far ahead of the curve because obviously a lot of people are still going to be using centralized exchanges. But, I do wonder about the utility of building new ones at this point. So I don't know. It's another SoftBank swing that they'll probably do fine, but I can't say I 100% am on board with their thesis.
I like the
Naomi, you
SoftBank
had a
as
really
a lagging indicator. That's really quite interesting, actually. I hadn't considered that, but that's interesting. Sorry, Noel, take it.
Naomi, you had an interesting tweet I saw yesterday, kind of talking about how Bitcoin exchanges or Bitcoin decentralized exchanges like BISC, they exist, but they're not too great. And then there's like DeFi in general, and there's a lot more trading volume on those things. What is your take on like the centralized versus decentralized aspect of trading here? And do you think that Bitcoin's kind of like lagging in that instance, and that's going to like keep centralized exchanges around because it's the most dominant coin that doesn't have decentralized exchange yet?
I mean, fiat to crypto on-ramps are all centralized, apart from BISC. I mean, it's one of the very few things out there that I've been able to find that actually does this in a decentralized way, and they do it really well. Of course, you're using a P2P app. It's cumbersome. It's like there's some risk involved, and so it isn't popular. These things didn't take hold, and suddenly your average person was like, yes, I would much prefer to use this, decentralized platform than just adding my bank card to an exchange. So I for sure think the centralized exchanges, just for that fiat onboarding process into crypto, are going to remain really important in the ecosystem. I would love to see more decentralized options for fiat to crypto. Like obviously, as you said, in the DeFi space, we have lots of decentralized crypto to crypto options, and Thorchain is cross-chain decentralization exchange, and so that's super exciting. But we haven't figured out the fiat to crypto route yet, and more people are getting involved. And as long as we have those bottlenecks that are controllable and censorable, we really are not living up to the promise that Bitcoin first put out there of being this, empowering, uncensorable, decentralized thing. If 99% of all Bitcoin trading is happening on these centralized hubs, we're not there yet, right? So you have this exchange that has just signed like 700,000 new users at the start of this year. Apparently, their trading volume increased to $5 billion, which surpassed the total for its first 7 years combined. So the number of people going in there into crypto is just going up and up. And we're either bringing them into this centralized ecosystem, or we're going to try and figure out how to decentralize that bridge between traditional finance and the crypto world. And I really hope that there are some solutions there, but I haven't seen too much.
Zach, from your reporting with
you.
Strike, blessings. Zach, with your reporting on Strike in El Salvador, what is your take on Latin American markets and crypto? Do you think it's like this is a huge investment? $200 million is nothing to sneeze at. But do you think like it's also ominous? Yeah, David did.
That was so slick. That was so smooth, Naomi. I think Latin America is for real. I think that narrative is not going away. Latin America has suffered from a history of devastating hyperinflation. So I think certainly the pump is primed there for crypto to take off even more than it is already. All right, we're going to change gears. Let's talk to Jen. Jen, what's going on?
All right. So the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, FINRA, said on Wednesday that they are fining Robinhood almost $70 million to settle charges claiming the company neglected its duty to supervise trades, maintain its technology, and protect customers. So the fine is the largest in FINRA's history. This is how it's broken down. It's $57 million that is the FINRA fine, and then $12.6 million in restitution to affected customers. Robinhood has agreed to pay, and yesterday they published a blog outlining some changes they're going to be making to their customer service and educational material on their website. David, I am going to kick this right down to you. What do you make of this massive fine?
To recap briefly, Robinhood, they attracted attention for a lot of reasons for kind of shortcomings. They had some trading outages specifically, and I I think this was actually, they mentioned this as part of the fine. There were some trading outages on Robinhood in the course of the GameStop pump, which really got a lot of people very upset. That's a technological, or well, that wasn't even a technological problem. That was actually a reserves problem that, it's unclear who was at fault there. But they've gotten mostly into trouble for how they display data about their leverage trading products and how they, market those to users. And in one particularly egregious case, there was I believe a guy in his late teens or early 20s who suddenly saw a display on his Robinhood app showing that he was $750,000 in the hole based on some margin trading or leverage trading, and he committed suicide. And it eventually turned out that was actually not an accurate display of his balance. And so that was just a very, very bad PR moment for Robinhood, and obviously a tragedy. I have to say, though, in the grand scheme of things, I consider this a bit of a growth and learning and kind of refinement opportunity. They're a startup. They're still working out the bugs. Obviously, there's massive demand for what they do. And I think that there is also a learning process for customers that needs to be remembered. Robinhood is offering leverage and derivatives to people who have never even heard of them before, much less actually tried to use them. And so, you can look at that from two angles. You can say, does Robinhood need to be more cautious about how it frames and markets things to people? Yes. But also, this is a new option that a lot of people didn't have before, literally new options. And so there's a process of people figuring that out too. So the fact that they didn't admit fault might be a kind of balancing thing here. They're taking their licks, and they're going to continue forward, and they're going to improve and I think fix the problems that have been identified here. But it's a big fine for sure. Naomi, what you got to add?
Yeah, I would add that it comes, this idea of educating new users to this platform, it really comes down to whether this is Robinhood's decision or the government's decision, right? Does the government have the right to come in and say, well, you need to educate more? And obviously the government thinks that they do have the right. I personally think that more education is a great idea for Robinhood, and they should be pursuing that. I obviously don't like the fine and the coercion aspect, and the government saying, this is all on Robinhood, because if you're using a new product and you have an option and it says spot trade or market order or limit order or all of this, are you just going to blindly click things you don't even understand and put a ton of money that's going to lose you millions of dollars? Or are you going to research it and figure out what those terms mean before you put your money in? Honestly, people who lose money just kind of say, well, I don't know what this means, but I'm going to put my money in it anyway. They probably deserve to lose their money, just to be kind of harsh about it. And I don't think it's the government's place to come in and say, well, Robinhood, you should have protected these idiots from their own mistakes by making it more clear. As I said, I agree that more education is better. If Robinhood had an explainer, or maybe they wanted to put on trainer wheels, you haven't used this before, are you an experienced trader? Maybe you use the products, play around with it, maybe play in our beta model first, that's like a test net before you get involved. All of those could be really helpful, but are they required to do that? Are they required to make up for individuals' mistakes because they're playing with things they really don't understand? I don't know. If I bought a flamethrower and I'm like, this is probably going to be good for a hairdryer, is it the government's responsibility to come in and say, well, sue the flamethrower company because Naomi didn't know how to use this product? I just think it's such a dumb concept. So I kind of push back against this. Yeah, go ahead, David.
I have to jump in and make one clarification on your metaphor, that at least part of this fine was because Robinhood actually labeled the flamethrower as a hairdryer. So they actually put out inaccurate information.
Wow.
So there's
okay, well, if that's it and they're mislabeling things, I totally understand this point. It seems like a fraudulent representation.
It's a little bit of both.
But if it does just come down,
be a grab bag, but...
Okay, all right. No, that makes a little more sense. I'm glad you clarified that.
Well, Naomi, while you were talking, I was reminded of a report we spoke about on this show months ago now that actually found that young people who are using platforms like Robinhood have this kind of FOMO and YOLO attitude about it. And a lot of people who were surveyed in that report, I can't remember who published it, did say that they were just all in. They didn't really understand what they were doing, but they saw an opportunity to make some money and get rich quick, which is so unfortunate that it takes situations like we're seeing now to actually force them to be educated, but I can hear control in
Well,
my ear.
it's
We gotta
hard.
move
School
on.
of hard knocks, as Zach likes to call
Yeah.
it. You go
Tuition.
out there, you make
Tuition.
mistakes. Yeah. Have we all lost money trading, margin trading, and not knowing what margin trading is? Because that's how I learned what margin trading is when I got margin called. And I'm like, oh, didn't realize this was a thing. I thought they were just giving me all this free money to trade that wasn't actually in my account. So that really did kind of jolt me into doing more research about this. This was a very long time ago, but I think that it's a kind of a rite of passage for people who stupidly, like I did, put money into things that they didn't really understand.
First time I bought a stock like a decade ago. Well, more at this point. Bought the wrong one. I didn't know how the tickers worked.
No.
Should have sued somebody.
Did you buy
anyway.
the wrong?
Yeah, should have
Did you buy
sued
the wrong
someone.
WorldCoin? Maybe.
Oh,
Great
nice to have you.
transition.
WorldCoin, my
Yeah,
friend.
David.
David is getting
I like
so
it.
good at
Let's
this
go.
TV thing.
Do this thing. Let's do it.
Yeah. So the former head of Y Combinator, Sam Altman, is involved in a new project called WorldCoin, which is frankly bizarre. And the reason I mentioned the wrong WorldCoin, because there's a WorldCoin that has existed since 2013 that is pretty basic clone coin as far as I can tell, and it has been pumping because this other WorldCoin is on the news. It doesn't exist yet. But the Altman WorldCoin, which to be clear, he's not in charge of. He has a different CEO, but he's one of the backers. His idea is to create a crypto network where everybody has a unique personal and specific identity connected to themselves individually. The way they're going to do this is they have a basketball-sized, currently in its current form, basketball-sized scanner that will take your retina print and generate what sounds like a hash from that and use that to verify your identity on the network. Now, the justification for this is that they need everybody to have just one account so that they can distribute funds. Altman basically says the idea came from his desire to do something akin to a UBI. And there are some obvious problems with this from a privacy perspective. But I think, Naomi, I'm most interested to hear what you have to say, particularly, well, one thing that bugs me is this, something about just having anything on a blockchain linked to your real identity in such a specific way bugs me. But I'm curious what your thoughts are on this eyeball scanning technology.
Yeah, I mean, it would depend how they're doing it, right? Because there are lots of platforms out there that do take maybe a phone number or an email address or some personal information, but they don't store it. They just create a hash of it. Sort of, now that we have zero knowledge proofs, there's so much you can do with this data without actually having to keep the data. You just need to have a proof that says, yes, I had the data. So I'm not that concerned if they're doing it that way. If they're maybe scanning these things, they're saying, okay, you haven't had an account before, they're hashing it and they get rid of the biometric data, but they actually have that proof on chain. I think that sounds kind of interesting, and it's a smart way to make sure that this system isn't taken advantage of.
And that does seem to be what they're doing, by the way.
Oh, it does? Yeah. I mean, I agree that at first sight, it seems kind of dystopian. Like, they're collecting eyeball scans. Like, it's so creepy. And then you have that picture of Sam Altman on the top. Like, Jen, I know that picture scared you. It's like, but I think that it's probably, I mean, we're going to have to rely on this stuff more and more because biometrics really are identifiable data points. And I think the conversation just needs to make sure that it's heading the direction of, well, how do we protect this? Because it's absolutely right that you do not want a database filled with this stuff. This would be an absolute nightmare. But if you were just using this and it wasn't identifiable to you, there was just, kind of some sort of zero knowledge proof that is on the blockchain and you're not storing that data, it sounds kind of interesting. But David, maybe you could explain a little bit more about what the purpose of WorldCoin is, because, people are talking about like how slow relief check distribution was, and what if we had this on a global scale that doesn't involve government systems? So what are they trying to do with this?
Well, I'm going to put a pin in that. I saw Will's hand go up. Did you have something to throw in?
Right.
Yeah, I think Jen as well. I just want to note that I love how we measure everything by basketballs in this story, at least, which is just like the oddest measurement. It's like Americans will measure anything but by measurements. So it's like turkeys or washing machines, and now it's basketball. Makes no sense at all. Jen, your thought?
Well, that actually set my thought up perfectly, because that basketball device is what I am most concerned about in this story. It cost $5,000. This is the device in which they want to scan eyeballs with to provide universal basic income. And David, you wrote this story so well. You just really your whole persona came out in it, and I loved it so much. I just imagine this device being taken off to rural areas in Africa to kind of scan eyeballs and get relief to underserved areas, and it didn't really make sense to me. It feels even more complicated than what we have today. And so how are we actually addressing the problem? I don't know if you have any thoughts there, or Zach, I don't know if you have any thoughts. I saw your hand go up.
I was going to say, send the orb to El Salvador. Sam Altman got to call up Nayib Bukele, because I don't know what El Salvador's doing, but this is definitely a situation in which this would maybe make sense. But I will pass the basketball back to David for his take.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point, and I think something that I don't consider myself a Bitcoin maximalist, but this is definitely, at least as it's being framed right now, if you're a Bitcoiner, you're going to look at this very seriously askance, because he is talking about this identity verification, but also creating a totally new payments platform and network and currency to go with this identity verification thing. And so you can question whether those two actually go together. Like, what if we could do an eyeball hash to make sure you have a unique Bitcoin address and somehow verify that? But Naomi, just to quickly your question, yeah, one of the things that I've written about before is the relief payments to the U.S. I'm sure I'm an outlier. I still have not cashed any of my pandemic relief checks for various reasons, having to do mostly with logistics. And so, the speed of getting relief payments or support payments to people really matters. So that's the argument here, is that if you're trying to distribute funds, something like this would be very fast, and that would have some real economic impacts. But Naomi, you maybe wanted to talk about Bitcoin.
Yeah, just as a closing thought, as we summarize, I do really like Sam Altman. I think he's pretty cool and has some really cool ideas. So I'm not writing this off. I think that it's definitely interesting and something I'm excited to see the direction it goes in. Obviously, I agree with you, David, about like this kind of global verification system. Like it has the potential to head into murky territory, but I hope that under the guidance of Sam Altman, it doesn't go in that direction.
Yeah,
sounds a bit like a global.
It's just about
sounds a bit like a global stablecoin, akin almost to Libra or CBDC without a CB in it. I don't know. Interesting. We'll see what happens. All right, we're gonna wrap the show here. This is our 101st show, right, Jen? This is our 101st show. 101 in the books.
According to the website, that's it. 101.
Amazing. Wow, we did it, folks. That's good stuff. Thank you for being with us. We'll be back tomorrow to do it all over again. I'm Zach. We have Jen. We have Will. We have Naomi. We have David. We're the Hash. We'll see you soon. Have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.